mud pies, and a sore bottom. I was at the age when most children become interested in what their elders do and try their hardest to imitate them. Also the age when children commence to feel their own importance as a person. They tend to question authority over them and act on their own. I was coming up to 4 on the dead run. Mother was a good cook. Her pies were my choice, and I watched her making them when I had the chance. I was too young to use flour and sugar the way she did, but that didn't stop me from making pies in my kitchen on the sunny side of the house. There were 2 large, flat stones. One was my table, the other was my stove. 2 wooden blocks, too big to move. One made good places to sit on when I had company. My kitchen cabinet was a water pail with a hole in the bottom, too big to fix with a rag plug. I had lots of dishes. Every time a plate or cup got broken, Mother gave me the pieces for me to use. My mixing bowl was a rusty bread tin. Just a few feet away was the garden, where I could get lots of flour, and my sand pile supplied the sugar. Mother's rain barrel supplied the liquid I needed. When I had a big baking to do, like making bread, cookies, and pies, I didn't use my mixing bowl. I mixed several jars of water with dirt in a hole Mother had made to get dirt for her houseplants. I must have been a fairly clean cook because Mother never scolded me for getting my clothes dirty. She liked my kitchen too. When the kids were asleep, she often brought her cup of tea and a cup of milk for me and some cookies, and we had lunch together in my kitchen. On this particular day, the sun was hot, and so was my stove. Marshall was having his afternoon sleep, so would be out from under my feet. I decided it was a good time to do a big baking. I got some apples that had fallen from a tree. I put them in my mixing bowl and crushed them with a stone and Papa's hatchet. I made sweet apple pies and put sugar on them so they would be sweet. I still had some mud left, so I went down to the pig pen to pick some blackberries. Mother had picked most of them before. I had to look under the bushes to find more. I found 2 eggs, too. An old hen must have gotten out and laid her eggs under the bushes instead of in the hen house. I mixed them up, shells and all, with the blackberries. The pies would be better like that. And I still had some cookies to make. I had just finished my pies and put them on the stove to bake when Mother brought Marshall out for me to play with. He had on a new white dress. It was the style of those days for a mother to dress her children, boys or girls, up to 2.5 or 3 years old, in long shoe top dresses, usually white. The reason for this was dresses until they quit wetting themselves. We played hide and seek for a while. He got tired of that. Then we played sticks and stones until he got to throwing the stones all over the place and nearly broke a window. I got him on the little wagon Dad had made for me. I put Shep's collar on and tied his rope to the wagon to help me pull. We were having lots of fun until I fell down and Shep ran away with the wagon. Marcia fell off and skinned his arm. He cried, so I took him to my kitchen. My pies were done. I put them off the oven and put them on the table. I told him he could watch, but not to eat them. I went for some water to make some more pies. When I came back, the darn kid was eating them. His face was a mess. I slapped his hand. He cried so hard I couldn't get him to stop until I let him make mud pies too in my mud hole. He wasn't satisfied just to use his hands. He cried so hard I couldn't get him to stop until I let him make mud pies too in my mud hole. He had to use his feet too. There was still some mud in the hole, thick enough for pies. When I took my newly made pies to the oven, he spotted the pail of water and waded right through the mud hole to get it. While trying to pour the water in the hole, he slipped in. When I looked up from my oven, I saw him. What a mess! He was on his hands and knees trying to get out of the hole. His dress was soaked with mud. Even his face was covered with mud. I went to help him out, and I slipped and fell in. As I fell in, I accidentally pushed his face down into the mud again. We were both covered in mud when Mother came out to see what the screaming was all about. She got us out. She was mad because I let Marshall play in the mud and get his dress all dirty. She didn't notice that I was dirty too. She pulled down my pants and gave me a good spanking with her slipper. She took Marshall into the kitchen to get washed, leaving me crying and dancing up and down from the pain the slipper had made. I knew she loved Marshall because she didn't spank him. She didn't love me because she spanked me. Grandma loved me. I was going to her. I wasn't going to live with Mother any more. Away I went across the road and over to Grandma's. I went in the house and called, but no one answered. There was the cookie jar on the table, waiting for me. I crawled up on the table and got one. They were a new kind with white, sticky frosting. As I crawled back down, I missed the chair and fell on the floor, and my cookie rolled over beside the stove. I could still eat it. Grandma's floor was always clean. Gee, it was good. I had to have one more. Grandma wouldn't know how many cookies were in the cookie jar. I crawled back up and across Grandma's white tablecloth on my hands and knees to get another one. I had my hand in the jar when Grandma yelled at me. It scared me. It made me jump. I knocked the cookie jar over. It rolled off the table and broke on the floor. I didn't think she noticed the cookies. Grandma never ate anything that fell on the floor. All the way from the door to the table, she was yelling about me getting her tablecloth dirty. With my muddy hands, with my muddy pants and black, sticky hands. She pulled me off the table, and the tablecloth came with me. She did not wait. She took off her slipper, pulled down my pants, and gave me another spanking right where Mother had spanked me. Oh, that hurt. Then she grabbed her broom and swept me outside. I had wet my pants, and she was stepping high. Then the tears were running down my cheeks. She was hollering about me taking things without asking. As she guided me with strokes of her broom and swept me outside. Around the house towards home she told me to go home and get washed up and not come back again. I headed towards home, but as she went back inside, I hid on the other side of the house. Mother didn't love me, so I couldn't go home. I stopped crying, so Grandma couldn't find me. I rubbed my sore bottom as I wondered, where would I go? I hurried down to the hayfield, careful that Grandma didn't see me. They were cutting across the end of the field and did not see me. Papa had told me never to go in the field when they were cutting hay because I could get cut. I sat down outside the fence to wait for them to come around again. The mud on my knee pants and legs had dried and hurt the back of my knees and my legs. I had to wash it off. The men had a long way to go around the field. I had time to go down to the brook on the other side of the trees at the end of the field. There was lots of shade from the hot sun under the bridge, and the water was cool on my sore legs. I washed my legs and picked some of the mud off my pants and threw it into the water. Something jumped out of the water. I threw some more mud and watched. I saw fish. Then I looked down through the shaded water. I could see lots of little fish swimming all around. I threw more dirt, and they grabbed it in their mouths. They were just like the hens. When you threw something to them, they ran for it because they were hungry. These little fish were hungry. Dirt was no good. I had gone fishing with Cousin Georgie and watched him put flies and bugs on his hooks. When he put the hook in the water, the fish would grab at it and swim away and wait for him to put some more bugs on. Sometimes they bit too hard and got caught. I didn't have a fish pole or hook, but that didn't matter. I could find some bugs and throw them in the water so they would get something to eat. I searched in the grass and found some ladybugs and threw them in. The fish were sure hungry. They jumped right out of the water to get them. I found some crickets. They liked them. I found an anthill and opened it up with a stick. There were lots of ants. I took a whole handful. Before I got to where the fish were, the ants were running all up my arm and biting me. The fish liked the ants too, but they bit too much, so I didn't try to get any more. I couldn't find any more bugs. It was getting dark, so I couldn't see them. That was okay. I had fed them a good meal, so I sat down and watched them swimming around until I couldn't see them anymore. Then I noticed that the sun had gone down. It was time for me to go and look for Papa. He would be finished now and ready to go home. I had been sitting very still. When I jumped up to go, a big bullfrog right beside me jumped into the water and made a big splash. I crept along the bank as quiet as I could. Every little way, another bullfrog jumped and made a big splash. I crept along the bank as quiet as I could. This was fun. I remembered there was a little pond further up the brook, covered with big lily pads. There was always a lot of frogs there. I crawled slowly so as not to scare them. I sat down and watched them jumping high into the air to catch a fly. Sometimes they missed the lily pad when they came down, and that made a big splash. But it didn't scare the other frogs away. Finally, they quit jumping and started singing. The old bullfrogs with their grump, grump, and the little ones with their bop, bop. They sang a little while. It was nice. It was real dark now. I couldn't see the frogs anymore, but as soon as they stopped singing, the fireflies came out of the trees and flew back and forth over the lily pads with their little bright blinking lights on and off. The frogs were still there because I could hear them splash into the water when they jumped for a firefly. I had seen fireflies at night when it got dark. There was no more fun now, and I couldn't see the frogs. I'd better go home. The top of the big full moon was just starting to show when I reached the hayfield. Papa was nowhere in sight, so I headed for the light in Grandma's kitchen window. I peeped in and couldn't see Papa. I knew then that he had gone home and had not got the cows in. I ran as fast as I could across the garden and back of the apple orchard for the corner of the fence next to the Hetheringtons. As I ran across the garden, I heard Papa calling for me from the hay loft of the cow barn. But I was afraid he would spank me if I didn't get the cows up before he got home, so I didn't answer. I just ran faster. As I crawled over the old stone fence, I saw Shep across the road wagging his tail. I gave him a pat on the head, then crawled through Burgoy, that was our French neighbor's fence, and stayed on his side so the folks would not see me, until I got over to our cattle lane to the pasture. Shep knew what I was after, so he trotted along in front, and I followed him. I sat down when I got through the trees to rest while Shep rounded up the cows for them and headed them for home. The gate had to be shut to keep the cows in, but the poles were too heavy for me to put up. I sat down beside the gate to wait for someone to come and shut it. The moon was shining bright, and pretty soon I saw Papa coming towards me. I was glad that it was Papa coming and not Mama. She was mad at me for letting Marshall get so dirty. Everything would be all right with Papa because I got the cows home and he didn't have to go after them. He asked me if I heard him calling. I said, yes. He said he was not worried because he knew I could find my way home. But it was so late, he thought I'd fallen asleep somewhere, and he wanted to wake me up before I got cold. I sure loved him for that. He asked me where I had been, so we sat down on a log while I told him about Mama spanking me and Grandma too, and about the fish and the frogs. He laughed and told me he had to give me a spanking for not having the cows up before dark as I had promised to do. So he took me across his knee, pulled down my pants, and gave me one easy slap. Then he pulled up my pants again. He said, "That should make you remember not to be late again." I promised. I thought he was finished, so I started towards the house. He said, "Come back here again. I'm not through with you yet." I came back. He said, "I have told you before, you must always answer when I call you. You didn't answer when I called you tonight." I was struck. I had to say, "No." He said, "Okay, I'll have to give you a spanking for that. Then maybe you'll remember next time." He put me across his knee again and pulled down my pants. I thought I was really going to get it good this time. I put both my hands on my bottom because it was still sore from the other spankings I had got. Papa pushed my hands away, then raised his hand. I clenched my teeth to help make the pain easier to bear. I was ready for the worst, but I hardly felt his hand when it touched my bottom just once. Then he said, "Guess that will be enough for tonight." I thought, no other little boy has as good a papa as I have. He put his arms around me and kissed me on my dirty, stained cheek and held me tight as he carried me to the house. When Mother saw me, she threw her hands up and said, "Whose little boy is that?" Papa said, "Ours." Mother said, "It can't be. He looks just like one of those little black boys in that story about Uncle Tom's Cabin." But she took me in her arms and hugged me as she took off my dirty clothes, ready for a bath in the warm water Papa had put in the tub. By the time she got the mud out of my hair and the rest of me clean, I was too sleepy to eat supper. Though I had eaten only one cookie since dinner time, and I felt hungry, I couldn't keep my eyes open. Mother gave me a cup of warm milk, but I fell asleep before I finished it. I was in dreamland before she got me tucked into my little bed.